I think the stream's up. Should be up. Hi, my name's Ramirez. I'm back again. Thought it I. Um, FrogBear.zil. Welcome to the YouTube channel. This is going to be. I wanted to have something where I'm a bit more relaxed. This is a story of the forums and the Obama years. Don't know why I'm super self-conscious about this microphone being this close to me now. Yeah. So this is a story that I tell all of my friends because I think it's important. But after all this time, I think it's gone to deaf ears. And I feel like, I don't know, watch something and now I think I know what it is. Because every time I tell this story, everybody's attitude changes. Because it essentially, I don't know, but I've paid. So this, one of my final pieces to this puzzle came when I was watching a documentary series with a past person, and it was Nixium. It was a Nixium Showtime documentary series where it followed like a distant relative of the Queen. So essentially, the only reason why this documentary exists is because a relative of the Queen was targeted. Her name was Anastasia. Funny how, dude, this after me watching this series, it just, I have very vivid dreams. I don't dream often, but when I do, it's gotten worse because I remember somebody saying, "Oh, you should cry. If when you cry, you decalcify your pineal gland." And I've also heard that if you drink apple cider vinegar, I drink a lot of apple cider vinegar. Either way, I don't even know why. Watching this Nixium cult, I saw this exercise where you get a group of people together and it's like this weird like circle hug group and everybody talks about their feelings or things about that happened to them in the past and all sorts of weird shit, right? And but the way that the Nixium cult was using it, um essentially the lead person who's running that whole organization, she used to be a psychologist that was well versed in neuro linguistic programming. Um, and she's the one that designed this group exercise. Like, this freaks me out a little because I remember doing those exact same group exercises alongside other high schools, alongside other students. And this was like, and this went as far back as, I want to say like 2010, when the after school program at my high school joined. So I don't know if you know this, but my generation, we didn't have any like extracurricular after school activities. And any of the after school activities that were provided for us were provided from a third party external company. And very weird levels of woo woo start to occur to my mind right now. But essentially, they were the ones that sponsored this retreat. We would go to like a campsite, then we would do these exercises for building community character. I don't even know what the fuck, but they all repeated the same thing that I saw from Nixium. And that really disturbed the living daylight, like the daylights, man. I was scared shitless. I don't know. To this day, this still freaks me out. But then I start, from that point on, I've noticed that there are various instances that I lived through that I've witnessed some weird shit. That was one of them. because I'm like, if Nixium is using this program to somewhat vet and like cherry pick people, what would that imply from my high school? And my high school was a charter school, and from what I remember, it that the problem exacerbated itself. So much so, I remember in one of my school retreats, it was like in the middle of nowhere, out by the mountains, and to scare us, they told us that like there's these weird cult people and they like to like do rituals outside and this and that. And somewhere along that trip, they were like, "Oh yeah, we also like to bring like second graders to fifth graders out here." And I was just like, bruh. At the time, it didn't matter. At the time, I was like young. I didn't give a fuck. Now that I'm older, weird levels of shit was going on, right? And this is right. So I'm gonna be talking about a story from 2010 to 2000, give or take 14. Um, and this all started with Reddit. Um, Reddit, Tumblr, 4chan, any public forum. But we're gonna highlight this because it was on the news. There was this whole thing, and it was one of the first times we saw a very large community-driven movement in order to dethrone somebody from their CEO position, and that was Ellen Pao. Ellen Pao. Recently, she had some very interesting things to say about the elitist people that she dealt with at her tenure. Um, Either way, it basically started off with certain subreddits or certain subreddits getting banned and getting nuked. And it was the first time that a form of censorship was kind of put on the internet. And it was like a big deal. And I can't remember, it was which one was it that was like the big, like the one that really popped it all off? And I think it was it was one where minorities were doing stupid shit. But honestly, the way I saw it was I grew up on Reddit and various aspects of the internet, and I always watched those videos as encouragement to be different. Other people, I don't know. What essentially happened was they conflated the issue to, oh, this is promoting this X, Y, and Z. Um, because of that, they decided to ban the subreddit, and they made a big deal about it. Ellen Pao just kind of like put her foot down with it. We signed a petition. There was like this whole thing, and they dethroned her from her CEO position. I want to say this is like 2012. I know I said 2010, but bear in mind with me. This is gonna be a long stream. It's a long story. Um, when this all occurred, and she was dethroned from her position, the new person that was put in was even worse. We went from like, oh, this is kind of bullshit to like, oh, this is bullshit. Like, what just happened? And at first it started off with going at 20 miles an hour. Then we just popped off to 250 miles an hour, and so many subreddits were banned. So much censorship. Like, nobody would have ever, at the time, right? I'm young, naive. I don't really know much about the world yet. Yeah, censorship kicked Reddit's ass hard around 2012. And this was an effect, right? Now that I'm older, I see things as, why did this occur? What catalyzed this event to make this occur? Let's move further with Tumblr and the ideological war that further developed and exacerbated itself from 2014 and on. The reason why I want to bring light to that is because, again, this is all anecdotal, so this is my story. But when I went to college, there was something very peculiar that I was watching happen. And what was it? I think my math scores were too low. I had to go to remedial math. Essentially, not college level math, but math below that. And right, this is hilarious because if you knew me when I was in middle school, I got a scholarship for math at a private school. But either way, me going to put me in all of these other classes, and all of these other classes, like one of them was sociology, right? The study of groups of people, blah blah blah. But all of these classes had like this weird veneer of like social justice warrior. And so I fit somewhat along with it because I remember one of my history teachers and whatever. Hold on, before I get to that story. I started noticing that there was a lot of rhetoric that was very geared towards being very sympathetic towards racial lines and like just seeing a narrative kind of play out in front of me because I remember my friend Nick, who I mentioned in the previous stream. I remember him telling me and looking at me and saying like, isn't it funny how if somebody has like if me and you, if we both had the same grades and we applied to college, you would get the position and I wouldn't. I was like, what the fuck? That's not fair. No, he said he could have had better grades, but they still would have given the position to me. And that's when I learned about what was it? It's like a bill that essentially will disproportionately put more minorities in school. And keep in mind, this is at a time where college loans are out of hand. 2011 was the start of this. I was merely one piece to this puzzle. Seeing, I don't know, I just still remember being like, all right, everybody, get to a computer, sign on to this. Everybody, if you don't even have an email, we're going to make an email today. I just remember that very vividly for whatever reason, but just seeing them help us make an email, understand how to fill out the FAFSA website. The FAFSA website is the federal loan. It's the the federal portal website that everybody goes to make an account and to see if you're eligible for loans. To see if you're eligible for loans. I don't know why I had to repeat that, but everyone had to do it. It's not, at least from my demographic, my high school, and the way I've asked my nephews and my nieces the same thing. How did it work out for you? And everybody has to do this exact thing. And think about how much money is generated from just these groups of classes each and every year. I'm losing myself a bit, but doing that whole process. Yeah, my buddy Nick, and seeing him explain that to me and just seeing the unfairness that, because the way I see it is the only people that should be in college are people who are adequate for it. I had to learn the hard way that I'm not very adequate for that form of learning. It's very confined, and then you're really subject to the professor. And not just, I don't mean that all professors are shit. What I'm saying is, whatever field of study you're going into, your professors matter. And I think I've just picked. I think I just picked professors that didn't challenge me enough. Is what I'll say. Just to give the benefit of the doubt. Only because, right? So your college is only as good as the talent that works there. And when you now know what I know about how teacher union work and how certain colleges will scout for some of the best talent in the world, John Hopkins is a great example of this. Just seeing this play out before my eyes. And that was the first instance where I just noticed that, what is that? It's some sort of mechanism here in universities where it'll disproportionately put more minorities into college, even though their white equivalent has, in most cases, better grades than them. But that's a whole other issue I digress from. But to me, it all depends. It all goes into loans. And keep in mind, the federal government will give more money to minorities than their white equivalent. And this has been going on since 2011, from when I went to college. I just kept tally of all of these instances that you'll see occur a bigger effect in where we are at now. Because if you think about it, if I'm 29 and I'm talking about 2011, all of the people who would have very important positions of power in terms of corporate offices, not just corporate offices, but who would be the workforce that works in these industries today? And those people would be somewhere along the ages of 25 to 33. I'm along that demographic. But if they've been teaching this rhetoric since 2010, it would make sense how culture was steered in this direction. Because once you get into college, I went to a very liberal college. I went to a liberal college, but my college was not that liberal. At least the way I remember it. I went to Humboldt State University. It's out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere in the woods. Some of the more famous things that is known about that place is Timothy Leary had a church and a gathering there. A lot of hippies meet in Town Square. I think that's as far as I'll go with that. But right, their town flag is the world, right? It's a picture of the world. That's their town flag. It's hilarious. Arcata. Um, I loved my time there. But at the same time, I had to understand that there was this tinge and veneer of being guided and directed with certain ethos, with certain ideologies. And I didn't, I wasn't there for long. I wasn't there for long. But just to see me being exposed to that, I could imagine what other universities look like. I went to a very small university in comparison. So, if that was just my experience, what did other universities look like? What were you being taught? What was the current ethos that was being promoted? Only because, again, I'm just tying it all back together. These policies or this direction change had to occur from a board of education. These are just things you can keep track of. Say this was supposed to be, well, it falls under the Obama years, so it makes sense. Because this goes back to the Manchurian Candidate video that I brought up, where we saw with Occupy Wall Street a very, very specific narrative where we were only talking about the billionaires. We were talking about the handful of people. And that message was obfuscated to be about just the rich. And essentially, the movement itself was ideologically subverted, where it no longer became a thing of class and it became more a thing of racial issue. And that's where the change had occurred. Was I largely believe that the Occupy Wall Street movement and seeing the effects of how free the internet was, how easy it was for people to affect the greater ethos through means of the internet, through memes, through organizing, through online forums. I think that was the first time what I would call the Obama administration or the Hillary Clinton administration realized the belly of the beast that they were dealing with, because they lost that war. It got out of hand. At first they wanted to make fun of it, but them giving it coverage was their biggest mistake, especially with Julian Assange leaking the emails, showing how nasty and vitriolic some of these CEOs were in discussing the people that they work for. I think this was like the first instances that we saw Hillary Clinton have emails released talking very badly about minorities, like saying that they smell, saying that she has to like clean herself after she touches somebody, that like very nasty shit. And to see all of this occur at the time, I just witnessed it. I was just there. I just knew people that were a part of this. But then to see Ellen Powell get dethroned, to see Tumblr begin to implement these these cultural pivot points. And the reason why I think Tumblr matters is because its largest demographic is women, and um, anybody who knows how to build or destroy empires knows that women pay the most crucial part in all of this. It's why the CIA uses them primarily for like information gathering details and stuff like that. Um, Problem gets worse. But to see all of these changes occur, all because of Occupy Wall Street, at least that's what I believe now. Because if I look at the greater world that we're in right now, where where has all of this led? Where has all of this, like, if this is where we are now, what were events or things that took place for our current circumstances to be the way they are? And I always bring it back to that era because this was the time that Obama was also spying on all of the journalists in when Obama started monitoring all of the journalists around the world. This is where you get into, what was it, the FISA documents or the FISA court, claiming them as foreign assets, and then being able to spy on them, being able to spy on who they communicate with. I also think that he probably, or at least whatever intel report came out of that situation, probably detailed out how journalists use a variety of different forums and a variety of different online means to also gather information. And it also gets into consensus cracking. If you control the narrative from the very beginning on all these online platforms, if any of your journalists who are on hire go to any of these popular platforms, their ideas are already cemented in their reality because the reality has been controlled from the beginning. This is where I really do believe that this all occurred from, was the establishment of these platforms, but under control and under the direction of a narrative or under the direction of some sort of optics. And there's no doubt in my mind that this all sprung forth from Occupy Wall Street. And I'm not even fully detailing out everything because I don't know. Do you believe, or would anybody believe, that an online forum has enough power to get anybody into presidency? Let alone if an online forum has enough power to go toe to toe against nations, in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of disseminating information. And in reality, right, we're talking about 4chan. How many times have one of their memes gone so viral that the real people have done it? Does anybody remember when people put their iPhones in the microwave? Well, guess who taught people to do that? It was 4chan, and it was all a meme. But again, it is about how to permeate. I think this is the most important lesson that was learned during these years, was how to permeate the minds of people. Cambridge Analytica was just was the more scholarly approach to understanding an overall large consensus opinion in a populace, thus to design rhetoric around that. And that's what I think Obama was in his entire administration. But there's much to be said about this issue. Much to be said about this issue. Because I really do doubt a lot of people would be willing to accept the fact that all forms of opinion to some degree are controlled either through the way that people were schooled or through the way that their opinion was formed around that subject, because usually people's opinions are largely shaped by what they see, by what they read, by what they listen to. And anything that'll fall outside of that paradigm will be deemed either false or met with large amounts of scrutiny, because again, yeah, you shouldn't believe everything you hear, but at the same time, the things that you already have instilled inside of you as truth, how do you know they're truth? And anytime I get into explaining this aspect of this story, I feel like there is an array or a form of control around this subject matter, because I'm clearly demonstrating that there was a clear visible effect that occurred in this time frame. We saw a clear reaction and we saw a clear direction in terms of policies, in terms of persecuting in a certain direction against hackers, against anybody who did anything meaningful. We also saw an establishment of Prism, the Prism program, where servers end to end are controlled, monitored, and data logged for metadata. We clearly saw even further development from that field, because Edward Snowden was somebody who stood as a figure to speak out against the NSA and their data collection aspects and their programs. And largely what him and Manning did was to somewhat skeletify the NSA programs, which then allowed for third parties like CrowdStrike access to NSA data servers to allow them to search, query anybody in the world. And this was, again, this piece of woo-woo it isn't just permeated in what occurred in the populace, but it actually implicates a far larger degree of planning from certain agencies, because they knew what they were dealing with. They knew, somebody clearly knew and measured up what the capabilities of all of this occurred. The PRISM program, right? And they wanted to make sure that it stayed in a very specific way. And I can also point this to a very interesting interview by a cop who was on Joe Rogan. Keep in mind, listen to what I'm about to say. Joe Rogan invited a Mexican police officer on an interview. A Mexican police officer on a Joe Rogan podcast. Now, why would that be? It would get the noggin a jogging, but essentially, what was learned through him was that there was a complete change of American laws and how you would trial or go against somebody who does something across the border. Essentially, he discovered, I don't know how to say this, because I need to rewatch that interview, because I'm loosely gathering this information. In this interview, he basically states that it was easy to prosecute an American across the border for doing illegal shit. Mostly was trafficking. Along the way, the Obama administration decided to change this. That it then required these extra steps in order for you to go after somebody. Like if you were going after an American, or if you were dealing with any of that aspect of things, now you can only deal with the American in question, or the person in question, that specific person in question. You can now not overreach your bounds and deal with any of the other enterprise. It's like you can go after the American who decided to go fuck that prostitute, but you cannot prosecute any of the ring. You cannot go after any of the pimps. You cannot go after any of the hookers. All you can do is touch the American. And I thought that was very peculiar. And there's a chain of command to all this. There is a form of how all of this strings on, but I'm just noticing a very peculiar pattern of actions and recourses that I've seen take effect through people who are in power, people who have the decision-making capabilities. And I think this is like my most dangerous story. Like I've got lost in the weeds, because I love talking about this. And it's funny, right? I love talking about this with my friends, but I've never actually made a video depicting any of these ideas. I'm pretty sure there's much more I could find, but yeah, I do have an Edward Snowden video on my BitChute. Yeah, I do not like Edward Snowden. By and large, I think Edward Snowden was a form. His entire existence is glorified because of what he achieved for the Central Intelligence Agency. And that was essentially allowing, or it's not that they allowed it, it's that's what they wanted. They wanted to gut the NSA from certain privileges that they had. And, it's kind of why Manning was required. And again, I do not like Manning. He broke the law. He hacked into these systems. Julian Assange never taught anybody how to hack. Because the rule is, if you can only release information that you have access to. By no means does that mean breaker entering or hacking any administrative systems. And that's also what allowed for one of the most draconian laws to exist in American cybersecurity, which is the fact that if you're an American and you try to hack an American system, but you do not have the permission of that person, you can go to federal prison. That's 25 years, just off the bat, just because of what you did. But if you decided to hack Mexico, hack a computer from there, and using the IP address from that computer to then attack an American computer, that's completely legal. How does that make sense, right? And what allowed for these sort of gray zones to exist is the Obama administration, and by and large, I think on purpose. I'm just saying. Either way, there's also this even crazier idea that suggested that whenever Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of whatever, they implemented the 16-year plan that would drain this country of its resources naturally. And by the time it hit the second phase, ideologically, the country would destroy itself. And just seeing the way all this played out, just to see the way that the Obama administration bled out ICE, bled out our agencies, and then replaced all of these people with cronies, I'm not surprised that this ideological war was started from the beginning, right? So back to the story of Reddit and that subreddit that was deleted because it was it was minorities committing violence and stuff like that. Well, now we're having allegations that certain social media platforms promote violence more towards minorities. And it's like, so if there was truth in Ellen Powell losing her job over this, then why are we having new platforms do that exact thing to the youth? I still remember when I worked at the high school, I remember seeing kids look at some of the most gory stuff on the internet. And I'm a 4chaner. I've seen some crazy shit. But I have, you know what I mean? I got standards. I'm like, I'm not going to expose myself to gore shit all the time. Like, that would just always leave me baffled. Hold on, I actually need to... How long am I in? Okay, I'm 30 minutes in. Do I continue or do I not? The Obama administration, I swear, like... The Obama administration, I would consider the most draconian level of control over anything I've ever seen ever. And the reason why I could say this full on is because they controlled everything about him. Even if you were a journalist and you took a picture of him, they would not let you publicize any pictures that were not approved of days in advance. So, to me, that is just not like some normal Machiavellian technique that they used for the celebritydoms. No. This was far above and beyond that. Because, after Julian Assange leaking all these emails, and then people kind of stringing everything together from 2016 or was it 2015? Whenever that pizza place got super famous, right? This all strings along. This ideological warfare, this whole thing with Occupy, all of this shit strings along together. But nobody wants to address the level of, what do I say, complacency? No. They had comrades. They had comrade in arms. They fully knew what they were doing. There were people on the inside watching this all take place within a 10-year span. It's kind of a, you would assume that's a lot of people in the Pentagon because some of these people stay there for 15 plus years. Those are the only type of people that would actually be able to make a meaningful assessment of the wind is blowing in this direction. Because who else has to be up to date with everything that occurs? And it just exacerbates when you understand the human psychology of living a day-to-day life, and why like normal citizenry would never pay attention to this. And it's only a very select few people that would get to witness any of these meaningful events that then would allow them to be like, oh, this happened here, this happened here. Why all happened under this man? And then like, it's like, wait, all this happened under this guy, but he's seen as a saint? But any meaningful assessment or criticism of this would immediately show you that I realize I spent this whole time without, I don't know. I lose myself in this story just because it makes sense. It makes sense to how we ended up where we are now. And it makes sense why some aspect of the intelligence community, right? You have to remember, all of the people that live in the Pentagon, they don't live in, well, some people do live in the Pentagon. But what I'm saying is Pentagon, DOD, alphabet agencies, all of these people live in their own gated communities. All of these people live amongst each other, know each other, their kids go to the same schools. That's normal. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, right, you have to maintain important people in important areas because national security, blah, 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 foreign actors, whatever bullshit we can make up. But meanwhile, we can send Bernie Sanders over to Russia. That's not the point. Because I think that was when he was a college student. The point is, being able to maintain some sort of an understanding of the people that you're dealing with and what they deal with. So of course you get this complacency of like, oh, I gotta back my brother. You know what I mean? Back the blue. Well, nobody backs the blue like the blue. You get what I'm saying? An officer will always look out for his other officer because they're brothers in arms, right? They're clad in the same color. So there is this level of complacency that you'll get within the intelligence community where it gets to such a point where they can't come out with certain information because it makes the country look bad. And, because so much of that has happened and because we've just kept kicking that can down the road, look at where we are now. So if there's any soft form of a resistance that would form, you really think they're going to tell one another, hey, yo, dog, I'm starting a revolution? When they understand the beast that they deal with, when they understand the cloak and daggery of this bullshit, like, this is some cloak and dagger bullshit. When somebody like Seth Rich dies in the street, they claim it as a robbery, but yet he still had all of his belongings, and then the guy who did the hit was also murked himself just to get rid of all the evidence. I don't know. I think about this stuff way too much. And I think that's what makes me a very dangerous individual, is because I just decided to think about it and be like, oh, this happened because of this and this happened because of this. And like, oh, somebody, the one person who made all of these decisions was Obama. And it makes sense. Like, I always loved this one because on 4chan, people would share this picture around often enough. But it was the one where he started his presidency, right? He looks young, he looks good, black hair, no problems, right? But then it goes into the end of his presidency, white hair, looks old, the crow feet have fully developed, like, he looks like nothing like himself, and he looks completely stressed. And fully knowing that aspect of things, fully knowing what he did, fully knowing how he fucking fired so many people inside of the military, inside of these various agencies, fully seeing how Obama was trying to overturn this entire system, you really think that nobody working on the inside was going to see any of this? You think that anybody on the inside would have done nothing about this? And I think this is why it's important that um, these division tactics are implemented not through the DoD side. I don't think they have that side of support anymore. That logistical side of support anymore, because now it's only delegated to the extremities of the Kraken, the extremities of Leviathan, which are essentially media controls, social media platforms. By media, I mean mainstream media. So any form of like sources of authority, like they're using their final card, which is the medical industry, because that's one of the pillars of human society. That is one of the innovations of all times. But I don't know why I said that in the Trump. Whatever. These are mechanisms of control, and to see them kind of be left to their last one, which is the big pharmaceutical industry, and people's reliance on the idea that medical science will save them. Um, this is their like last hurrah. I think they've played all their cards essentially now, since Fauci's like, we need more stringent restrictions. I can't even speak like him. Seeing this develop the way I'm looking at it develop, it is why it is imperative for them, for this culture war to pop off. It is what it this whole thing, it is important why they're like, actually this makes more sense now. The race issue didn't work. Them trying to get people to pin against each other worked to some degree, but it's not working to the degree that they want. That now it makes sense to me as in why it would be a trending issue to see this whole red pill dating men versus women thing pop off. Because if they can't get you within the dynamics of, you know, white versus black or minority versus whatever, civilized, whatever, the goalpost has to move somewhere. The new platform of division has to be set up somewhere. And after fully seeing what their playbook looks like, the eugenics movement looks like their last play. And I've been saying this for a while now, and me posting my weird Pepe art is proof of that. I really do believe that these implementations of these new medical experiments is their final solution, as in final solution from World War II era. Them controlling aspects of reproduction, them keeping data logs of people's medical information, the attempts that we saw of them doing mass sweep DNA collection, because there were a bunch of firms that were doing DNA testing and figuring out where your heritage is from and all this other stuff, and then seeing certain companies just go out of business and then being bought out by even bigger companies. So where does that data information go? Very, very interesting things that I'm like, hey, we've seen this progress in one direction, and it does not look pretty, and it looks like but again, they're on their last leg, which is the pharmaceutical industry. Because, I mean, who watches the news and believes in everything they say, fully knowing, after fully seeing the Biden president, you know what? I'm going to end the stream here. I'm 44 minutes in. I like that number.